Yeah. Give these guys a big hand. They have done so much for us for Diversity Week.
I really appreciate what you people are doing here. This Diversity Week, this is an incredible concept.
You know, we came together when Jan was filming about the peace sign, and kind of realized that we were on different sides of the question. And in the course of filming, we started to talk. We recognized that we had things in common, and we decided to explore those and spend some time over coffee and lunch. And gradually, the things that we had in common were both Irish. Our fathers both play the violin. We had this long history with the supper table conversations and learning to disagree, that those things were really more important. And I know Dan's taught me a lot just about what it's like to be a veteran, because that was not a perspective I had, and that has enhanced me a lot. So one conversation just led to the next, because they helped us learn and grow. Good.
I think also, both of us, Betsy had come to our Veterans Day ceremonies before I really ever got to know her. And I had been involved on my commentary on public radio. I talked about peace, I talked about the issue. And so in many ways, we were already doing some of the things that we ended up later doing and that were in the movie. We were doing them, but we were doing them separately. And then through the process, especially of this movie, it kind of brought us together. And we came to realize that we really were saying the same thing to different audiences. And in the past, we'd been saying them over each other. And now we realized we could say them to each other and build something from that. I grew up in the 60s, and John Kennedy was a great influence on my life. And believing in service to country was something that I grew up with. So when the time came and Vietnam was happening, I volunteered for service as part of my culture. I went to Vietnam, and I was proud to have served, but I think when you go to combat, when you go to war, it is such an incredibly different experience than anything you may have had in life. And I was 19. The average age of Vietnam soldiers was 19 and a third. I was, a 19-year-old. And when you see what happens in war, it changes you. There are some good that comes out of war, surprisingly. It's not the war itself, but it's the camaraderie that you feel with other soldiers, if you have a sense of purpose. But there's also a lot of negative. And so when you see people, your friends dying, when you see the damage, the destruction, when you see little kids who are starving, when you see all that sort of thing, it changes you forever. I think what Vietnam did to me probably was put a fire in my gut that will probably never go away. The effects of war, but also the fact that of caring for the veterans and then trying to do something to make sure that nobody else's kids ever have to go do that. We can't go around killing each other's kids. We can't keep doing that. But there's a better way to resolve our problems. The differences will be there. And there are times, I think Jimmy Carter once said that war may be a necessary evil, but no matter how necessary, it's always an evil. And I believe in that as well. But as far as the experience in war, it's intense. Any of you who will be going off to the service, any of you who have sons who are in Iraq, or sons or daughters in Iraq, Afghanistan, when they come home, they're different people. Because they've seen things, they've expanded, stretched their mind. So my experience in war was I was a combat engineer, which means I planted mines and blew up things, demolition. I was in the Central Highlands of Vietnam, which is a mountain country. That was my experience. That was where I was at. I think what you saw in the film pretty much stated, what it did to me or where it led me. I will always remember my friends, my buddies. I'll always remember the experience, the positive part of it. But I always will remember and feel the negative part, and hopefully we can turn the negative into something positive. And I don't want to get into telling a lot of specific stories, but basically it's something that changed you. The things that one goes through in war, and it doesn't matter what war, the things you go through will change you. And I think all of you who are going to be maybe going into the service later, I think you need to really prepare yourselves for what you're going to do, because you are going to come out of it a different person. And hopefully it can be a better person.
Okay.
I'll let Betsy address that, but I think from my standpoint, going back in time to the 60s, the peace sign sort of was the sign. I suppose our uniforms were a symbol at the time that offended people because people identified us with the war, the people who were opposed to the war. But the peace sign was at the time the symbol of the group, the people who were against the war, which hence we interpret as being against us. And that's why it was so intense. I have come to look at the peace symbol, not necessarily the sign that was on the hill, but the peace symbol as something that represents the feelings that the peace people had, and I've been able to adapt to that. I'm not sure if there was a similar sign. I think there was probably more rhetoric than a sign from the hardcore on the other side of the political spectrum that might have offended the Betsy or the peace people, but I'll let her answer that.
When I started my career, I worked in a veterans hospital, and I was a social worker, and was totally accepted, learned a lot, appreciated that. But when I started at the Peace Center, one of the things that I really wanted to do was build bridges with the veteran community, because I totally believe that I can't be about peace if I'm only talking to people who think like me and people in the choir, that I have to go find those people that are outside the choir if I really am truly making a peace center. And I think, just the whole concept of a veteran in uniform or veterans groups were a little daunting to me, in part because, as a social worker I was accepted, but when I would call them as the director of the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center, they may not call me back. They may tell me I'm not welcome at their events. They may tell me that they're not going to participate in a community event if I'm there, because the Peace Center doesn't isn't in the same arena as the veteran groups, and so that's kind of daunting to me. Today, I told Dan, absolutely wear the hat, because that's you. I'm familiar with that now, and it's not so daunting, in part because there's other veterans who now come up to me and greet me warmly, and even got a gift from one at the screening on Sunday of Beyond the Divide. So, it's when we go beyond those symbols to look at the humanity behind them, I think, that is, and not get stuck in the symbols. That's where we make progress. So that was a great question. Thanks.
Thank you.
Can I add one other thing to that? Talking about the veterans, the offense that was caused by the peace movement or the anti-war movement and by the peace sign to veterans, in all fairness, there were a number of veterans. And first of all, understand that Vietnam veterans, there are going to be all sorts of different opinions. Not all were affected exactly as I was affected. I think I speak generally for the population, but you're going to find different opinions in the veteran community. But not all veterans were amenable to working with the peace movement. They were condescending. And Betsy and the other people who in the peace movement took a lot of flack from the veteran, some of the veterans' leadership, some of the veteran community. So it was a two-way street. And back in those days, we were yelling at each other and talking over each other rather than to each other. And the fault, Shakespeare says, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. And the fault was within each group. And so this hat probably would have been offensive, especially considering it's a beret, which was a real common symbol of soldiers during the Vietnam War. And so now I wear it, and it's very comfortable around the peace people. I also think it's probably appeals because it covers a head that doesn't have as much hair as it used to have. That might have something to do with it.
I think the biggest thing for me is role modeling. I know that I can't control everybody. I know that I have to let go of the outcome of what I want. I want people to follow me. I want everybody to agree with me and see things my way, but that isn't always true. They don't, and they certainly have that right, and you know, that's all part of this melting pot that we have. So there are people that have left the Peace Center because I honor veterans and they don't think that's appropriate. There's certainly people that have talked to Dan about hanging out with peaceniks and how that's not appropriate. And you know, that's their opinion and they're entitled to it, and that's fine. I think the bigger part is that people have seen what Dan and I have done and they have respected it, and I've just like the gift that the veteran gave me. I don't think that would have happened if Dan hadn't led the way, if it hadn't been for that example. So I guess summing it up is being okay, accepting the fact that not everybody's going to follow you. Everybody's on a different path at a different time. You plant seeds, you hope that they are heard, but maybe they're not heard today. But I suspect they will be tomorrow or next month or next year. And the biggest thing is that you take the high road.
I think also when you talk about people boycotting Diversity Week or whatever, I hurt for them. I feel sorry for them because they're missing such an incredible, not only opportunity, but such an incredible reward. And as far as, you know, what was the most effective tool, I think recognizing that we are limited in what we do, keeping our message constant. You know, we've been a lot of years at doing this. I hate to betray my age, but I've been on the radio for like 30 years, you know, and it's, you know, you hope that in that amount of time people will listen. I think keeping the message constant and keeping it fair and I shouldn't use that term, keeping it fair, keeping it you know, consistently open is what's really important. And you know, as Betsy said, it takes time. These people aren't going to be convinced this afternoon. But you know, you're going to turn one little corner at a time. You're going to take one little step. And eventually, over a period of time, I think people will hear the message. And even if they don't totally become involved, don't totally submit to it, they're at least going to start thinking about it more and more.
Who knows? We certainly are continuing every day to deepen our friendship and to broaden the number of people in our various communities that join us. We've talked about some common events that we might do together, remove the message, remove the politics, remove the agenda, and just get people together to be human together. Find some ways to do that. Of course, the film, you all are helping make the film community engagement project so that people will all around the country be able to see the film and talk and dialogue about how they can go beyond the divides in their life. So we hope that we'll be part of some of those conversations. And you know, this is always continuing to learn because we're not perfect either. So we can always keep learning about that.
I think this film is a great tool, and it's going to be used in schools. There's going to be curriculum guides with it. Hopefully, every school will have this film, be able to talk about it. But every school will start having diversity weeks, and so hopefully that'll happen. Hopefully, this film will go on to whether PBS or whatever it'll show in various places.
Guys, we're out of time. Thank you to Dan and Betsy for coming out. It's been an awesome experience having you guys here. Thank you so much.